Welcome to the ATA podcast, where we talk to former elite athletes sharing their insights and wisdom derived from successfully transitioning into life beyond the game. A very warm welcome to the Athlete Transition Accelerator podcast. I'm delighted to be joined by George Garrett, a former professional cricketer with Warwickshire and Kent, and only very recently started the process of transition out of professional sport into that next chapter. So George, first and foremost, thank you very much for sharing your time with us today and welcome.
Thanks for having me. Look forward to it.
No, you're very welcome. Now, obviously, you may know some of the format of what we tend to do with guests. George, we're naturally talking about transition. We're naturally talking about that whole process, but you've dedicated a huge amount of your life to first-class cricket and obviously doing the research on you, seeing those images of you as a young boy in your whites and through to being an elite professional player. It's only relatively recently that you've made the decision to step out of that chapter, but now that you have stepped out, give me a memory or one or two memories that bring to the fore a real sense of pride looking back at that sporting chapter.
Sure. I think the obvious starting point would be my first class debut. It's back in 2019. So, I was 19 at the time, and at the time I didn't feel that young, but reflecting on that moment, I was a young boy, and to have that moment, have my dad and my brother were there in the stands, and to get my first wicket in front of them was a very special moment. I think kind of moving forward, bizarrely, it was probably when I got released by Warwickshire and then had to fight for a contract and go and trial at Kent.
Okay.
So a period of adversity and being, disappointing to kind of get released, but then, going to work hard and achieve something, and get a contract elsewhere for Kent was certainly a kind of a career highlight. It would have been easy to think, well, that could be the end of the road there. I've got to go and do something else now. But I kind of rolled my sleeves up and tried to make the most of that situation. I suppose going further, I got to play at Lords in a first class game, which was a dream come true for sure. I used to go and watch games of cricket with my family at Lords growing up, and to play a professional game there was special. To walk through the long room, sit in the dressing room, and actually bowl pretty well there, which was definitely a career highlight for sure.
Yeah.
I was also got to be part of the championship winning squad with Warwickshire, albeit I didn't play much, but to be around that environment and to win a trophy and the celebrations that came with that, that was pretty cool.
Yeah. And there's a raft coming through there, which is always lovely to hear. And it's funny how family always weaves into these conversations, whether it's Olympians, team sports, individuals, and right off the bat, pardon the pun, it was lovely to get that first wicket with your dad and your brother in the stands. And I think it's testimony to your character. I've seen a couple of your posts on LinkedIn as you stepped out of sport, expressing thanks. But I think every elite athlete knows there's so many sacrifices take place behind the scenes, isn't there? Particularly by family, shepherding you around, taxing you, supporting you, going, keeping your spirits high. So that was obviously important to you, that family support.
Yeah, it was massive. And I remember in that moment feeling quite emotional because I suppose that, playing and getting a wicket at Edgbaston in a first class game, I know how full of pride my parents were, I'm sure still are. And I think it was pretty moving, and not much comes close to that in terms of giving back, if you like.
No.
All those hours on the M6 or whatnot, going to cricket grounds and
I'm sure that they'll recognise that, and that has given them plenty back. My daughters are still pretty young, but I have a newfound perspective on when I was playing professional rugby. Obviously, you don't just step into that place as you didn't just step into cricket. There's years and years of a journey and travelling all over the country, as you say, to watch. So before we move on to the transition, I'm just curious because fast bowlers, you've said that's what you did. What was the most challenging? Who was the most challenging batsman you had to play against?
Well, I think back to my T20 debut. It was up in Durham. It was a Sky game. I wasn't really expecting to play, and there was kind of a litany of injuries. So I ended up playing. I bowled the first over of the game, and got smacked for 20 runs in the first over. That was by Darcy Short, an Australian international batsman at the time. So that was pretty challenging. I suppose best batters statistically wise, Alistair Cook. So Alistair Cook was up, he'd be up there.
Yeah, yeah. And
Babbitt was
just from a mental perspective, because I know we're going to talk about transferable skills in a bit, George, but that's hard. You know, there's no doubt. We've all sat armchair sports fans watching cricket and see when a bowler gets knocked around, but it's the opening over, it's the opening of a game.
Mm.
How do you get yourself mentally right next time the ball's in your hand for the next over? How did you sort of reset? Because, you know, for a layman, it'd be easy to say, well, that's it. You know, I've ruined my start here, and let yourself spiral. How did you keep yourself on track?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that instance, the T20 debut, I didn't bowl again in that match, and then I played again 2 days later at Edgbaston against Yorkshire under lights. You know, I think it's a long time ago, but I feel like the game coming pretty thick and fast helped. I had less time
Yes.
to mull over it. I remember actually that evening in the hotel lobby in Durham, it was one of the overseas last games. So he was like, "Well, we're going to go for a few drinks." We were staying over that night, and I remember my teammates, you know, they didn't allow me to go and sit in my room and feel sorry for myself. They kind of put some perspective on it, and we ended up having quite a kind of fun night in Newcastle. And I think that was, yeah, at that time I didn't think much of it, but I'm very grateful for one of my teammates to be kind of offer that perspective and tell me to keep your chin up and you know, go and enjoy yourself. At the same
Yeah.
time, the next game coming thick and fast, I suppose you just have to deal with what's in front of you rather than sit there and mull over.
Yeah, exactly. And it's curiosity, because we obviously, the conversations we're having at ATA, we hear these sort of analogies all the time. It could be, you know, a disastrous first 2 or 3 holes of professional golf, or getting hammered, you know, 6 games to love in the first set of a tennis match. It happens. And I think what a lot of athletes have, and perhaps are not always aware of it till they step out of the sporting bubble, is a high level of resilience. You know, they've had to deal with really challenging, exposing situations like that. And then, as you say, 2 days later, no time to brood on it. Let's go again. So I do think those moments of adversity help when you step out of sport, because they've given you an inherent set of resilience. I also think what you touched on there with your teammate, that sense of spirit, that sense of togetherness, that sense of what it looks like and is to be a good teammate, is another experience that's invaluable in business, because you rally around each other, you pick each other up, and we're sometimes a little bit blind to that when we get into industry, not seeing the signs of somebody that's a bit down, somebody that's struggling. And it's another thing that sportsmen and women do very well. They're just aware, they're emotionally intelligent. They step into that bubble and say, oh, I can sense this team's not quite firing. So for those athletes that are listening now, they might not be aware of that, but as they move through the transition, it'll be something they'll really come to recognize as a skill. We could talk about the cricket all day, George, but tell us a little bit about what brought that chapter to an end. Not presuming, sometimes, you know, contracts are not forthcoming, sometimes it's injuries, sometimes it's a desire to do something else, but give us a little bit of an overview of what brought you to that point, and then a little bit of what's been happening since. I know it's not that long ago, but what the sort of plan of action is for you moving into this next chapter.
Sure. Yes, I'll start with the first arm of the question. It was a real mix of different things. There wasn't one kind of particular reason that made me kind of hang my boots up, as it were. I, I was in the final year of my contract, and that was unsettling. I was kind of had reassurances that something might be offered, but that didn't kind of materialize in the time that I would have liked. And I think that process in itself started a thought process in my head. Well, do I want to keep going year by year, kind of 1 year deal to 1 year deal for the next 5, 10 years, if I'm fortunate to kind of carry on playing? So I think that kind of kickstart question marks, and then combine that with being a seamer in county cricket is quite an unfashionable role at times. It's very physical, a lot of sacrifice. Your the county season, there's a lot of games packed in, and I was tired a lot of the time, and I kind of thought, well, is this what I want to do for one the short term, but kind of medium term? Do I want to carry on putting my body through this?
Hmm.
I know that it's hard to find that balance because when you speak with people, you don't want to come across and paint it as it was bleak and it was horrible. It wasn't. There were parts of it that I absolutely loved. Um, but I think I had that perspective to think, well, I'm probably not going to go and play for England. My skill set is centered on bowling lots of overs in county cricket, 400 overs a summer, potentially 500 overs. And I thought, do I want that? And I probably didn't want it enough.
Hmm.
Um, I think the second I started thinking that, professional sport, as you know, James, like you're either all in or you're not. And I think the moment I kind of started to doubt that, I thought, well, I'm going to start making proactive decisions. And the moment actually I kind of plucked up the courage to pick the phone and ring the director of cricket at Kent. I was actually playing in a club match in Dartford, and despite being a bowler, we were short at the top of the order. So I think I batted number three, got up second ball, and I had 3 hours to kill. And I thought, well, I'm going to go on a lap here. And I just rang around everyone that I needed to kind of do it in that official capacity. So yeah, that was kind of the trigger point is getting zero, but it was a build up of kind of weeks, if not what, months of thinking actually, you know, there are kind of other avenues to explore out there.
Yes. And
Uh,
listen, George, I just to say, I really admire your candor and the way you've laid that out because I know it's not easy to talk about. And I sensed that, your trepidation when you said you don't want to make it sound like it's all terrible. But it is a theme that comes through a lot when we're talking to existing athletes. Invariably, if I can make a sweeping generalization, they do enjoy the buzz of competition,
mhm,
but sometimes the preparation and what's required to get there, in particular around the training and the grind, is no longer appealing. And when you're putting your body through things, especially in contact sports, that soreness, that getting up, more physical contact work, but equally where there's not contact, as you say, putting your body through a heavy toil, there's almost like a guilt when they talk, I'm not really enjoying that anymore. But that's okay because
mm,
sounds very cheesy. Life's not a dress rehearsal. We get one crack at it, and nobody says you have to do any one thing, one discipline, one job or anything for life. So
mhm,
listening to the signs I think is important. Also, you've talked about another thing there that we hear time and time again, and I experienced it in my rugby career. There's nothing more unsettling than rolling 1 year contracts
yeah,
because you're only one serious injury away for putting yourself in a really vulnerable position. I've been on both sides. I've been a chief executive. I understand why you're balancing budgets and potential and all the
yeah,
reasons why you do the 1 year. But from an athlete perspective, you sustain a serious injury and then the clock's running down and you don't know whether you're going to get another deal. So that mental pressure is very relevant as well. So there's a couple of very personal perspectives you've given there that tie into a wider theme that we hear from a lot of people. So, where does that bring you to now, then, George? What's the plan? I know you. Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what do you see as being the next chapter? What are you exploring? What are you training towards?
yeah. So I suppose the long-term goal is to try and become a qualified solicitor
Great.
in England. So I'm currently doing a law conversion course, so back to studying, which has been, yeah, an eye-opening experience for sure. Having 6, 7 years out of education to go back into it, going from a dressing room environment to a library environment has been, yeah, kind of a shock to the system. But equally, I've embraced it and I've really enjoyed that. And yeah, I think that was one of the appeals of law is how the study meant that transition wasn't a hard transition in the sense that I wasn't going from a cricketing or dressing room environment straight into an office job. It was like
Yeah.
I'm gonna study for a bit. I suppose in that time I'm using this period to speak to a lot of people, kind of network, have lots of different conversations around, where like law is pretty general. I think sports law, for example, would be a really cool avenue to explore. Um, yeah, so I think it's about studying, but equally having that perspective and reaching out to different people, talking. And I think one thing I've been taken aback by is how going from a professional sport environment where ultimately everyone's competing against each other, give or take, and people are giving with their time, but there's always that, I suppose, barrier that people might feel threatened by someone, and they're not going to fully go out of their way to help you
Yeah.
entirely. Whereas making this transition now, a lot of people are very interested in, and they're very giving with their time, whether it's a coffee or work experience or this, that, or the other. So that's been quite, I suppose, a fulfilling, process in chatting to a lot of people.
Yeah, I like it. So I suppose just give us the timeline. So when did you actually? So was it at the end of 2025 really that you made this decision? End of the cricket season. So that's how recent the transition is. We didn't really stipulate that at the start.
Of course, yeah. So that was in August last
Right.
summer.
Right. So
Um,
yeah, it's very recent then. And then
yeah.
you've gone into this law conversion. So was that a plan that you formulated, as you say, you had that club game, you made the decision, you spoke to your director of cricket. Did you quite quickly settle on, I think I want to do this law conversion? Did that come before the decision or after the decision to step out of professional cricket?
I mean, I hadn't fully committed to it until after I made the decision. I think in my mind that was certainly an avenue that I wanted to pursue.
Right.
And I started that in January. The
So
reason
you,
being is
right, yeah.
the cricket season kind of went into the end of September, so I couldn't join this September cohort. So I started that in January, and kind of I used that time between, um, you know, October time to January to apply to lots of different kind of law firms in part
Yes.
of their recruitment cycles and whatnot. So yeah, that in itself is a completely separate to study, but that's been an interesting process as well.
And that process, it's obviously still very fresh. It's very recent. That's why I just wanted us to go back there. So it was only September that you finished. We're only in June, July now as we come into the following year.
Mhm.
You've talked about the transition from a dressing room to a library. Just when you just do look at the overall view of the transition, how have you found it? Because there's no, as we were saying earlier, there's no one size fits all. Some people really step into that next chapter. It's all about looking forward. No problem, off we go. Some people really struggle with that loss of identity, the sort of mourning the previous chapter. So just from a mental perspective, you've talked about the practical perspective. You're getting out there, you're networking, people are being very forthcoming, and you've thrown yourself into this conversion. How's the process overall been from you now that you're in it? That mental side of things of actually closing the door on one chapter and stepping into this next one.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say there have been times where I've found it fairly easy, in that I kind of called it my career on my own terms,
Yes.
which I think does make it easier. So I didn't hold no grudges or anything towards sport. I'm at peace. I've never made the right decision in that sense.
Great.
However, have been moments where you go into a certain settings and you feel like you lost your identity. Um, you know, people, yeah, you've had kind of circumstances where people will introduce you as like a former professional sportsman. You're no longer current, and may sound silly, but it does. You just maybe kind of your credibility.
Yep.
It's all in my head, but yeah, you probably think, oh, maybe that kind of credibility in social scenarios isn't as significant as it was. Um, but yeah, I'd say on the whole, it's been fine. I mean, at the same time, I'm studying at the moment. I'm in that process of trying to find a training contract as well, and I think the longer that process goes on, I might find it even more difficult in terms of like lack of security and whatnot. But
Yep.
yeah, on the whole, it's been fun.
Great. And again, I have to say, I admire your candor because we have a lot of these conversations with people behind the scenes. And that's the lovely thing about the podcast. You bringing that to there so people can hear it. And what you just said then is the very definition, very articulation, really, of that identity wrestle of have I lost a bit of credibility? Have I lost a bit of kudos in social standards? Because it used to be, well, here's George, the professional cricketer. And so many people listening will relate to that. But there's a lovely phrase that Carl picked up from one of the guests we had, and I've got a mental block, I apologize, but it's a phrase we've used a lot, and Carl uses it regularly with athletes, that who says your second chapter isn't going to be better than the first one. And I really like that mindset because when we're struggling with identity, it's like, oh, I've peaked. I was an Olympic athlete. I was a professional cricketer. I was a professional footballer, whatever it may be. That's me done. But invariably, that chapter's closing late 20s, maybe early 30s. And there are decades still ahead of you. So there's every chance that credibility, to use your word, will be significantly enhanced. In your case, it could be, here's George, the world-renowned sports lawyer. But when you're in that moment of transition, you're very much looking back. So I love the way you phrase that, and I hope that gives people a bit of comfort of that's what most people think. Yeah,
Mm.
I always use the example of Dan Carter, the former New Zealand All Black, who'd been there, done it all, won World Cups, talking about how difficult he found it. So please don't beat yourself up if you're in that transition process and you feel a little bit edgy about, oh, have I lost a bit of credibility?
Mm.
Just bringing it back to the education point of view, one of the things I noticed, a nice post that you made on LinkedIn was talking about how I don't want to butcher what you said, but
Fair enough.
in essence, education and keeping your education running alongside your sporting dreams and pursuits. Do you want to just bring that to life a little bit for us, George?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I was fortunate that when I kind of left school, I went to university in Birmingham and was on the Academy of Warwickshire, and that kind of fell into that rather than me kind of actively um, putting that plan together in my head. Um, but I'm so glad I did do that because I think that having that degree allowed me to go and do this law conversion. So it yeah, it was difficult, and there were periods where I had to balance a lot of things. It's kind of managing challenges around COVID and um, equally trying to maintain high levels of performance around trying to get a new contract to Warwickshire and stuff like that. But yeah, I think there was always that kind of voice in my head saying, this career is not going to last forever.
Hmm.
And without kind of you know talking down on my own ability and my own career, I was good, but I knew I wasn't. I felt like I had to work incredibly hard to kind of maintain that. I wasn't as natural as some of these guys that are, a name like Jacob Bethel springs to mind. Like I lived with him for a bit and kind of came through the system a bit at Warwickshire, and he was just destined to go to the top. And I knew that I had that kind of perspective that wasn't going to be me.
Right.
Um, so I was like, right, I need to make sure that I have things to fall back on. And I don't know whether I was unique in this sense, but it definitely, I don't know whether I was fearful of kind of what would come next, but it was always in the back of my mind. I wanted to make sure that that transition was going to be, I knew where I was going, if you like.
Yes.
We could figure that out. I think, yeah, and that kind of drew me to law in that it's broad enough to have that choice, but equally, the carrot's dangled, right? You have that a fairly, yeah, the roadmap is there.
Yeah, exactly, and that I think is the power in your story there. Because if we pick out one of the regrets that comes up most regularly from the athletes who are a little bit further down the road than you that have transitioned, is I wish I'd used my time away from my sporting discipline
Mhm.
more productively. I'd sat and had a bit less time in the coffee shop or on my Xbox because whilst we've got to recover, we've got to develop our skill set, there's a lot of downtime. And so they wish they'd pursued their education because what you alluded to here is a perfect illustration. Because you've done your degree, you were able to do a law conversion, which is going to accelerate you into the world of law far more quickly than if you were starting from scratch
Yeah.
now. You would be in training for a significantly longer period. And I think the word you used and the word we hear a lot is balance, probably linked with discipline, George, that it can be done, but it just requires a bit of discipline and a bit of focus to get the balance right, to not drown yourself in study, but to find those windows when you can invest in yourself. Is that a first statement that that's the key thing, the balance and the discipline, just to keep both trains moving, if you will, the study and the sporting development?
For sure. And yeah, I think that's a prerequisite for anyone that kind of takes, what's to come next, to kind of stay on top of that. Having said that, I've like I alluded to earlier, like within the summer of the county season, you're knackered all the time,
Yeah.
and it's not conducive for even on the days off. Sometimes you just want to sit there and just slob out, which is equally fine as well. Um, I think, I suppose that word balance, right? I mean, I was fortunate enough to go and play 3 seasons in Australia, uh,
Right.
and like those experiences were incredible. And I've got lifelong friends that I'm still in touch with. I'm going to see a few of them, this summer. And in those winters, I could have stayed here and perhaps been in the indoor school, but equally gone and studied more or been even more proactive. But I chose to go to Australia and kind of have that life experience. So I think, yeah, I think that balance is everything. It's about kind of throwing yourself at opportunities that being a professional cricketer or professional sports person allows you to have. Um, Australia, case in point, but equally, where there are windows, or you think, well, start having question marks about what's coming up next. It's like, well, what can I do um, to kind of offset that doubt by
Yes.
throwing yourself into education, or even stuff like work experience, or just speaking to context and going to do a week somewhere, just so you in your mind you're like, well, I don't want to do that, I didn't enjoy that, or
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that,
No,
that
exactly.
was
Well said, George, because that's one of the challenges we sometimes get. Well, hang on. If I throw myself lock, stock, and barrel into full-time education, I'm going to do myself a disservice and not develop or realize my potential in sport. And that's why the word balance is so powerful here. As you said, the sporting development is fundamental. It's at the front and center of everything. It's then about taking some of that downtime, using it for recovery, but taking another section of it to help prepare you, because it's not about compromising your sporting development. It's about enhancing your mindset and your well-being of thinking, well, if something was to happen, and we hope it doesn't, I got a serious injury, or if the contract renewal didn't come, I'm not starting from scratch, because that's when the stress is on the ceiling versus I've done a little bit. And with a lot of education programs, what we've found is institutions, universities, further and higher education institutions are very flexible. They'll allow you to spread out a period of study so that you can remove some of that pressure. So, no, I think it's nice to see how you've run both sides there. Just going back to the networking side, George, that you mentioned again. I just want to touch on that again, because that is another fear that we hear a lot. Oh God, how do you even network? What am I going to do? And you just touched on it earlier by saying it's been pleasant, it's been surprising to see how willing people are to help. So is that just looking for opportunities, looking for advice? I just want you just to reiterate that, really, because I think that's a fear that a lot of people have. I don't know how to network, and I'm not going to be able to network.
yeah. I mean, one thing that I found interesting is how in cricketing or sporting environment, your performance is your currency, right? It's kind of runs and wickets, and
Yeah,
with that, I think that breeds a culture of um, not kind of selling yourself through words. All your talking is done on the pitch, and I think that's where you get the respect of your peers and your opponents.
yeah,
And I think a byproduct of that is that when you go into resources like LinkedIn, you're not kind of conditioned in a way to like sell yourself or be that proactive. Or at least that's the way I felt. So I've kind of had to like just drop that or stuff that I've kind of learned and think, what, I'm gonna put myself out there a bit more and just be really proactive and be really yeah, I suppose pretty out of your comfort zone, if you like.
hmm
And yeah, well, that's kind of through contacts. So cricket, a lot of people, whether it's different cricket clubs or Kent and Warwickshire, I've certainly leaned on contacts that I've known there in terms of if they know a lawyer, for example, that I've
yeah.
copied. And again, people have been so willing to give their time. I think LinkedIn is a awesome resource, and it's something I'm kind of getting to grips with. Again, putting a post out there and not worrying about how you're going to come across, but rather like, who cares?
Yeah.
All I'm doing is I'm trying to put myself out there. I'm trying to kind of make connections. You can still do it in a humble way, and it's not like look at me, me, me. It's more like actually making this transition. I want to try and make it as easy as I can for myself, and I'm looking to meet like-minded people, right?
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, again, well said, Joe. It's just interesting to hear you navigate through this, because it's almost transition anxiety bingo, you could call it. There'll be people going, oh, that's me, that's me, that's me, bingo. So once again, you're talking about, well, you're not conditioned to do it, but you've got to do it. You've got to put yourself out there. You've got to get out your comfort zone. And everybody worries about, look at me, look at me. But part of the DNA of an athlete is you were a professional athlete. And therefore, you need to showcase that, because it is attractive to people for the reasons we said earlier. You've got work ethic, you've got high levels of resilience, you've got communication skills, all the things that employers are looking for. So if you completely erase that chapter, make no reference to it, never talk about cricket in your case, then people are not aware of what you've done. And if somebody has a negative view of that, well, so be it. That's just the same as in your case, you could be in a stand in a stadium full of people, and some people would admire your bowling, and some people would criticize it. That's human nature, isn't it? But
Yeah.
LinkedIn and engaging with that, it does daunt people. It's an area we do spend a lot of time with clients, helping them from the most basic of this is how you understand it, this is how you craft things, through to actually a much more managed service. But because it is a bit of the fear of the unknown, but whether you're working with us or not is immaterial. It's just a case of take those baby steps, put yourself out there. And I've seen you've put a couple of posts on that have had some great engagement. So I think you're a good case study of doing that. So we've talked about a few things here, George. One of the things we always say to guests is we all heard that phrase, we're all geniuses with the benefit of hindsight, but you've got a little bit more wisdom than existing athletes because you're a few months down that track. It might be a repetition of a point you've already made, but we always like to hear the perspective of the guest. What's one do and one don't that you would say with regard to existing athletes, whatever the discipline, that are still competing? With the benefit of hindsight, you could say, do this, it'll make you transition that a little bit easier, and don't do this, it'll probably make you transition easier as well as a consequence. What comes to mind on that, George?
I think in terms of do, I think work experience, and what I mean by that is let's say the season finishes and you have a 4 week window. In cricket, for example, we had most of October off before we came back to pre-season in November, and I think I wish I had just gone, even if it was a week or a few days, just dip my toes in the water a bit more in terms of doing different things.
Yeah.
And even if it's a process of elimination, I didn't enjoy that. Let's say hypothetically, I went and worked with, I don't know, financial advisors, for example. And you can work pretty quickly when you're in the building. Right? I do enjoy this. I don't enjoy that. And yeah, I think I wish I had more of that to kind of go off.
It's a great shout. And that's that point again. Just before you come to your don't. Well said again, because if you don't rule things in or rule things out, you can drift down a plan. That let's stay on your example. I'm going to be a financial advisor. That's what I'm going to do. That's what I determined post my playing career. I'm going to do it. Only to find when you get there, this is not what I thought it was. It's not what I want to do. Panic, stress levels rise. I need to reset. Versus doing it whilst you're competing and saying, it's not at all what I thought it was going to be. And actually, I'm ruling this out whilst I've still got time to look at something else. So I think that's another very pertinent point you made. Do the experience, if only to rule things out as much as to rule things in. So sorry, George, I jumped in there. What comes to mind on the don't side of things for you?
I'd say don't think you've got to take it all upon yourself. I think I've certainly been kind of guilty of that. For example, in this law school stuff, I thought I made the call. I'm going to make sure I'm studying on my own and working it all out myself. I definitely, I wish I'd kind of lent on the lectures more and my fellow students. And I think that is an example of maybe it's a legacy of being in cricket and feeling like I've got to take it all on myself. I've got to train. It's all comes from within. It's my career, no one else's. And yeah, I think the overarching point there is that lean on people, even if it's conversations around, in the team, right? And I think back to Kent in my last summer, and a few of us in our final year, and speaking with them about kind of their insecurities or what they're worried about. I think it helps. I remember speaking to the physio at length. Kind of, he just gives a different perspective. He's not caught up in kind of the rat race of kind of performance. And yeah, I can think of numerous examples where if you actually open up to people, you never know, one, what they're going to say, how they're going to reframe it, but two, kind of who they might know, who they kind of think, actually, have you thought about that angle? As opposed to being like, I'm going to try and, it all comes from within, which at the end of the day, of course it comes from within, but that doesn't mean to say that, you don't, it comes from within, but you've got a good network around you. Comes from within, but you've had a lot of healthy conversations, and I think that makes you a kind of better person, as well as hopefully a better lawyer down the line.
Yeah, and again, you talk a lot of sense, George, because I think what comes from within, undoubtedly, that work ethic, that motivation, that desire to get things done. But as I say time and time again, whether you're looking at your professional development, sporting chapter, professional in industry, or personally, very few of us ever walk an untrodden path. Very few of us are doing something that nobody has ever done. And therefore, it makes perfect sense to try and accelerate your learning. And the only way to accelerate your learning is to ask people about their journeys, to ask people what went well for them or didn't go well for them, and to download that intelligence and put it in your own sort of proverbial toolkit and say, right, okay. And what we're all very frightened of is actually opening up. And that senior player to junior player dynamic exists in so many sporting teams. You look at them, you put them on a pedestal. They've been here for years. They do great things. They've got the same vulnerabilities, I guarantee it. I was fortunate enough to play at Newcastle Falcons at a time when it was a star-studded team, and I was just coming in as an 18, 19-year-old. There were superstars in that team, but they were very, very humble guys. And I learned a lot about life and rugby just on some of those long coach trips, because you'd ask questions, they'd give you answers. It wasn't, well, they're international superstars and they're not going to talk to you. And I think that message of lean on your network, whether that's academic support, tutors, peers when you're studying, teammates, or indeed professional network when you get out. Most of us have got a decent enough moral compass that when somebody comes and says, could I just ask you a little bit of advice? We're not going to be offended, and we're going to actually be quite, complimented and say, well, of course, how can I help? So not being frightened to ask, I think that's a great one, George. That's a great piece of advice.
Thank you. Cheers.
So just wrapping things up in terms of the quick fire then, this is, again, it's a stock addition to the podcast now. We didn't do it in the early days, but it's proved to be really popular because it just gets a little bit of wisdom extracted to finish things off. So as they come out of my head, the first thing that we tend to ask is the best piece of advice you've ever received. It could be sporting related, it could be life related, doesn't matter. What's a little gem of wisdom that comes to the fore when I ask you that you'd be willing to share with us?
Amongst lots of different things, I'd say a good advice. I don't know how to kind of put it into or articulate it, but I think don't be afraid to, don't be afraid to kind of open up to people, but in the settings that aren't within the dressing room. So what I mean by that is, I learn a lot from players in having a drink with them, big downtime, whether it's over coffee or beer or whatnot. Like if you have any of those moments where it's offered out, like go, because you never know what you might get out of it. I think also to follow up to that is a good advice I was given recently is don't approach these events in a transactional mindset and think I have to get something out of it. Turn up to these events because you're curious and you might take something from it or you might not. But you never know kind of the person you might meet there, or two, you might be doing someone else a favor, and you don't know how that kind of might kind of get feed down to you in time. So
well, that's a lovely thing. I love that. That's really good advice. I heard something recently, George, that rather than go with that classic "what do you do," and going into that very transactional space, somebody had this phrase. It was something along the lines of, "What are you excited about at the minute?" And they used that because, to your point about curiosity, it really opened the conversation up. And the conversation, when you ask somebody that, it can go anywhere, personal, professional. As you say, you're not going in with a roller deck checklist of ticking things off, are you, in these situations?
Big time, for sure.
So next one that comes to mind, best book that you've read, a book that you'd share. These have proved really popular. Anything come to mind for you on that one?
Well, I've read a lot of books.
They're all law studies. They're not that the law ones might be a bit dry for people at the minute.
Yeah, landlord textbook this morning. I'm not going to recommend that. I'm not going to say book. I'm going to say like fiction.
Okay.
I think you should There's a lot of self-help books out there, and I've read a few of them. I think some of them are very practical and applicable. But I think by reading good fiction, it helps you become more empathetic because you're thrown into a perspective that the author wants you to kind of get into, and you can kind of get inside the mind of somebody else. And that can be anyone. Like there's so many good fiction books out there that just it takes you away from your own reality, and you kind of submerge in this new world. At the same time, that you're escaping your own kind of thoughts, and you're kind of going into someone else's mind. So it's like kind of left field answer, but I'd say good fiction shouldn't be neglected.
No, and I agree wholeheartedly with that. I mean, reading's a huge passion of mine. I love fiction. The Lord of the Rings are probably the classic example for me that I picked up when I was playing professionally. And I love that, as you say, that escapism. You just lose yourself in what's going on there. I'm going to challenge you though. Go on. I'll push you just to give me like a favorite book in that genre. Then is there one that comes to mind? If there isn't, don't worry. But I always love to get at least one recommendation. Selfishly for me, I end up buying most of them that get recommended.
Yeah. I'll probably contradict myself now. I'll go like having book I read recently was Andre Agassi's kind of autobiography,
Oh, Open. Yeah, that's a cracker.
and that was really kind of insightful in the way, someone that was so good yet kind of arguably hated the game.
Yes.
The relationship he had with his father, and how kind of his route, coming from having a tennis court in his back garden and like, his dad building a machine that he's hit balls back, and I suppose the trauma that, yeah, I think it was a great lesson to the appearance versus the reality. I think
Yes.
that can apply to a lot of sports people in that, they might be the best player in the world and have all these commercial deals and whatnot. But, beneath it is a lot of hard graft. It can be very unfashionable. And that
Yes.
kind of parallels to the recent Rafa Nadal documentary on Netflix, which I watched, and someone as good as him, but the challenges he had to face physically and mentally, kind of a
Yes.
tennis theme that on brand with Wimbledon going on at the moment.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. Well, do you know, I've seen the Nadal thing pop up. I haven't watched it yet, but I wholeheartedly endorse that view of Andre Agassi's book. I remember it's a long time ago that I read that, but being genuinely shocked that somebody
Mhm.
that's so globally recognized for their achievements in tennis could have such a love-hate relationship with the sport, as you say. And
Yeah,
for any parents out there, and you've been very effusive in your praise of how grateful you are for the family support and the part that played, it's a really damning indictment on the pressure and the damage that parents can do by pushing too hard. And I'm sure his dad might say, yeah, but look where he got to, but at what cost? So, yeah, that's a great tip. So, just on a slightly lighter note, then, just in terms of it's a classic question, you'll have heard it before, but I still like to throw it out there. It's a dinner party, you're hosting it, you're looking for three guests. There's magical powers to this, George, so they can be dead or alive. We'll bring them back. But who would be on the guest list? Three people to create a good evening of banter and entertainment. Who's round the table with you on that one?
um, I studied history at undergrad, so it's got to be a historical figure to start with. I'd probably go Winston Churchill. I think you
Yeah,
can't go past him
love
in
that
terms
one.
of. I mean, he's someone that yeah. See, everyone thinks of World War II and kind of how he obviously was unbelievable wartime prime minister, but equally he had a lot of challenges in his life.
Yes.
Whether it was Gallipoli in World War One, or yeah,
His
he's a
mental
fascinating.
health as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But equally, I'm sure he's got a good sense of humor and yeah,
Yeah.
a real character.
Yeah.
I suppose sports person. I think Roger Federer would be quite a cool one to have there. Just a
Yeah.
guy in terms of who's his class. I'd like to going to talk to him about how he stays so calm on the court and kind of again appearance in reality what was going on inside and how he kind of navigated that. Um,
Yeah. Like that.
and then maybe football fan, someone like Paul Gascoigne, I think would
Yeah. He's
just see a
popped up on
complete,
a couple of guest lists.
yeah,
He'd bring some entertainment, wouldn't he?
just a bit of maverick, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, someone that's kind of a complete rough diamond. And be a nice contrast to Federer.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah,
No, that's a great. I don't join everyone, but that's one that I'd enjoy coming and being a part of. I think that's a great lineup. So, final question, George: is there anybody in your network that you would say, actually, we should reach out to them and have a conversation, maybe get them on the podcast in terms of their story of transition? Does anybody come to mind from your experiences? Someone that's done it a bit differently or had a challenging or exciting period of transition?
um, I mean, there's someone. Joe Leach is someone who's currently going through a transition. He's different to me in that he had a far longer and more successful career than I did. He's a bit of a legend at Worcestershire. He's just left the game. He's now got a job at the PCA, kind of a player, kind of liaison role capacity. But
Yep.
I played with him in in a game a couple of weeks ago, and just chatting to him about some of the kind of feelings he's felt towards that transition and kind of what he thought might happen as opposed to what has happened. And he's
Great.
really interesting and impressive guy. So yeah, I think
Yeah,
he'd
no,
be
that's a great recommendation. We'll definitely reach out to him. So, George, listen, I think it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. It's so recent, this stepping away from professional cricket. So it's to your credit that you've thrown yourself into the law conversion. I've loved the candor. I love the humility with which you talked about those challenging thoughts that start to percolate in your mind that sort of preempted this decision. So many athletes are listening to those at the minute and probably suppressing them a bit because of fear of the unknown. So I hope you've helped give people a bit of confidence there that when those voices start to bubble up, we've got to listen to them. For anybody that wants to find you, George, reach out, connect with you, where's the best place? Would it be LinkedIn to connect with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn, George Garrett, GARRETT.
Perfect. Well, we'll make sure we put that into the show notes, and I'm sure plenty of people will want to reach out after listening to you on the episode today. So thanks again for your time. Wish you the very best of luck in the completion of your studies and that journey of moving into sports law. Thanks for your time, George.
Thanks, James.
Thanks for joining us this week on our ATA podcast. If you found this conversation insightful and it resonates with your journey, please subscribe, follow the show, and stay connected with us for more insight, resources, and information on how we at ATA are supporting your preparation for life beyond the game.